If we want to rid Penn State of rats and vermin, we first have to stop laying out gigantic pieces of cheese for them to feast on. I had contemplated not discussing this information. It's unpleasant information. And when I first spoke about this subject at the Penn State board meeting back in March of 2015, it led to some people becoming very uncomfortable. I'll include a link to that discussion below this video. But I had promised you from the start that I would speak to you honestly, thoroughly, and meaningfully. And we cannot simply ignore these elephants in the room, not if we have any hope to ever restore righteous governance to Penn State. So pull up a chair and please bear with me. If you watch this video, I think it'll be clear to you why we have to have this conversation, and while you may be disgusted by some of the things we discuss, you'll be glad that you at least know. Trust me. Mark Dambly and the Penn State capital spending honeypot. Sounds like a Winnie the Pooh story. Mark Dambly and the Penn State capital spending honeypot. When we look at this spending, hundreds of millions of dollars per year, and as we discussed in the capital spending video, take a look at that if you haven't seen it yet, we know that we've got a governance board that is completely derelict in their fiduciary duty, that we have a process that is completely unvetted and provides unfettered access to graft and corruption. You understand how foobar that process is and how ripe it is for fraud and corruption. You also know that the man in position to benefit from this fraud and corruption is this guy. You see that pretty picture? This man, Mark Dambly. In our video on capital spending, I referred you to this video, to this discussion, a discussion of the man who has the access to the Penn State Treasury. Now, Mr. Dambly's past includes some items that might be referred to as youthful indiscretions, DUIs, possession, etc. Although he wasn't a youth at the time of these incidents, but we sometimes call those types of events youthful indiscretions. But there's much more. As many of you may recall, when in congruence with the recommendations of the free report, the gift that keeps on giving, it was determined by the board that everyone at Penn State, from the deans to the custodians, must undergo a criminal records background check. Everyone except, bewilderingly, for the members of the Penn State Board of Trustees. Everyone except those folks placed in the position of the highest responsibility over the entire university, they were excluded. Everyone else had to go through a criminal records background check. At that time, and I assume many of you have seen this news report, Gary Senderson of WJAC News in an on-camera interview asked Mark Dambly about the exclusion for the members of the board. And he asked Dambly if he, Dambly, had any issues that should be disclosed. Now at that time, Gary Senderson was holding in his hands the documents outlining Dambly's arrest, conviction, and incarceration for assault. Dambly, as can be seen in the interview, we'll provide a link to it somewhere, flatly denied having any issues. He said, nope, not me. I've got no criminal past, nothing to hide. Apparently Dambly had incarceration amnesia, because at that very moment, as he was speaking those words, Dambly had an attorney working for him to try and expunge his criminal record, which he didn't know about. His denial was a bald-faced, self-serving, hypocritical lie. In other words, it was standard order of the day for Mark Dambly. And yes, there's a lot more, but I think the point is made with regard to Dambly's personal ethical compass. So let's move on. Let's look at Dambly's professional history. This is interesting. What is the history of his actions, the history of this person controlling Penn State's funds, and are there disconcerting issues with regard to his work in construction projects outside of Penn State? Dambly began his career as a home builder, real estate guy. That all went to pot under a flood of civil judgments, defaults, and bankruptcies. Well, there are plenty of folks that run businesses that have failed, so no big deal. You can move on from that. Of more importance, and of much more relevance to Penn State, Dambly was then, after those failures, turned on to the government-financed affordable housing market by his friend, John Barnhart, and they're still partners to this day. John Barnhart, by the way, is a Penn State grad. And that remains Dambly's business interest today, and those two remain partners. Now, for those who don't know, being involved in the government-financed affordable housing market is a very unique sector of the real estate market. And if you know what I'm talking about, it's kind of like being involved in the waste management business in New Jersey. That's a given, and it's no secret in the real estate business. Now, how does this government-financed affordable housing thing work? And by the way, you might ask, what does government-financed affordable housing and how it works matter to Penn State? What does it have to do with the Penn State Board of Trustees? Bear with me, it has a lot to do with the Penn State Board of Trustees. Government-financed affordable housing. Government-financed affordable housing. What a setup. Now, how does this process work? Particularly for folks participating in this process that might be somewhat ethically flexible. Here's how the process works. And it's the reason why this is considered maybe the most graft-ridden government project out there. Billions of dollars every year are allocated by the federal government to be used to build housing projects for low-income individuals. Those billions of dollars are then funneled by local politicians to determine where those dollars will be spent. Those politicians, they don't build apartment buildings. They funnel those dollars and determine who gets them. Okay? Who gets them? A facilitator. The facilitator then, the person who plays this facilitator role, gets a chunk of the money, let's say $1 million out of a $10 million allocation, and their job then is to oversee the project and make sure it gets completed. The facilitator sends the rest of the money, $9 million, let's say in this case, over here to the contractors, electricians, excavators, plumbers, etc., large contractors that work on large projects. That contractor then is to spend the remaining dollars to build the facility. And as long as everything's allocated, that the facilitator got their chunk and then made sure that the rest was paid to the contractors, the government, they're good, they're fine, they're happy. Everything worked in their mind as it was supposed to work. Now, for those who might be somewhat ethically flexible, how does the process work? This contractor, the key here is one of the keys is to have a mutually beneficial relationship with this contractor. Because what does the contractor do? Since no one's really watching, the only person who might be watching is the facilitator over here. But if we have a mutually beneficial relationship, the contractor submits invoices and says, I spent $9 million on this project. What they actually spent, let's say it was $6 million. $3 million was still sitting around the honeypot. $3 million then, it could be divided up. The contractor takes an extra piece, the facilitator takes an extra piece, and probably the funnel, the politician who made sure that the money went to this facilitator, probably gets a piece. They're in on the action too. Now, that's how the process works, and that's why this process is considered to be maybe the most fraudulent process in any government sponsored project. I was looking for a quote here from the Congressional Investigation Committee who looked at this process. I don't have it right here, but we'll talk about that in a minute. But in any event, this is a very nice business plan. Very nice business plan. I don't do anything for the most part, and I've got $1 million plus $3 million to divvy up as pure profit. Does this happen? It sure does. Oh, here's it. The congressional investigation into this process referred to this business as a training center for the corrupt, as a proving ground to learn how to benefit from lack of oversight. That's what this process is, and everybody in the real estate business knows it. Now, in Dambly's case, with respect to Penn State, the corruption avenues are even worse and bigger than that, far, far worse, because he has completely unfettered access now to the Penn State Treasury. Now, as I said before, Penn State's not in the government-financed affordable housing market. Why should we care? We better care because the person running our process is in this business. Let's take a closer look then at how Dambly has operated in this business. First thing we need to have a politician that will make sure that we get those allocations. Who was Dambly's politician? Down in southeastern Pennsylvania, down in Delaware County, Chester City area, where a lot of low-income housing funds were sent. The politician in charge was Dominic Pileggi. Some of you may know the name of Dominic Pileggi, some may not. Dominic Pileggi was in charge down there. He allocated, typically these funds are allocated by local politicians, some to one facilitator, some to another, they divvy them up. Pileggi, he's a ballsy guy. He allocated 100% of the government-financed affordable housing dollars down there to one man, to Mark Dambly, 100%. Caused a federal antitrust suit, big mess. Dominic Pileggi also and this is where it crosses over to the Penn State side, Dominic Pileggi later was the head of the Senate, the Pennsylvania Senate, and he's the guy who placed Dambly on the Penn State board. Now, why would Dominic Pileggi care to place Mark Dambly on the Penn State board? Why would Mark Dambly want to serve on the Penn State board? An institution that allocates out hundreds of millions of dollars in capital spending money every year? I wonder. Now, there's more. There's always more with Mark Dambly. Mark Dambly's go-to contractor during his days in the government-financed affordable housing market was J.J. DeLuca. J.J. DeLuca, big contracting company. J.J. DeLuca is no longer in business. When they were in business, they did some work on Penn State projects, by the way. J.J. DeLuca is no longer in business because they were charged and convicted of fraud in a project down in southeastern Pennsylvania, Philadelphia Navy Yard's condominium project, if I remember correctly. What he was charged with, what he was convicted of, was submitting false invoices, i.e. submitting invoices saying I spent $9 million on the project when really I had spent $6. Collecting the $9 million on the fake invoices and putting the $3 million in his pocket. Gee, I wonder where this trick has been used before. And again, with Dambly, is there more? Sure, there's more. In addition to this government-financed low-income housing market down in southeastern Pennsylvania, Dambly is currently under a subpoena in an FBI investigation into the Allentown public construction corruption case. Now, in that case, Allentown Mayor, you may be familiar with this, you may not. Certainly our board members are familiar with it. They don't seem to care. Allentown Mayor Ed Pawlowski is being investigated for graft, for soliciting kickbacks, political kickbacks, in the awarding of government construction projects up in Lehigh County. Dambly's under subpoena in that investigation. Why? Guess who Pawlowski's #1 top campaign contributor is? The mayor who's being investigated for soliciting campaign contributions in order to award government housing projects. Mark Dambly is the #1 contributor to Ed Pawlowski's campaign coffers. And he's also involved in millions of dollars, this is a shocker, involved in millions of dollars of public construction projects up in Allentown under Mayor Ed Pawlowski. Odd coincidences just seem to follow this man wherever he goes. At this point, isn't it clearly insane, absolutely insane, to think that the Penn State Board continues to rubber stamp projects at the behest of Mark Dambly, given what we know about his background? But they do. They continue to. In fact, Trustee Fenza, in maybe the stupidest statement ever made in a boardroom, criticized the rest of the board, saying that they should make it easier for the Capital Spending Committee and Mark Dambly to push through these projects without any discussion. Fenza, put him on your list. So here we are. Here we are with no one minding the store, and it's only getting worse. It's only getting worse. Dambly, Luvert, operating with impunity, operating completely unfettered in robbing and raping the Penn State Treasury. And no one's minding the store. And I'm telling you, if we want to get rid of these rats, the worst thing we can do is to keep feeding them, and to keep feeding them bigger and bigger and bigger hunks of cheese. And if they have their way, having us open the pantry doors and walk away and allowing them to feast at their heart's content. And to date, no one on our board has ever raised the issue. And they know about it. And they will not raise the issue. That, my friends, is not responsible stewardship. That is fiduciary failure of the highest degree. And they're all responsible. And it's up to us. We're the only ones. No one else has a voice in this process but us. It's up to us to determine if that's okay. And thus far, with our silence, we have said that's okay. I hope we have done that out of ignorance, that we didn't understand the situation. Now, you and I do understand the situation. And it's up to us to either raise our voices or to consent with our silence. It's up to us to determine, as it always has been. Thank you for your time. I appreciate you listening to the video. If you have any questions, certainly contact me through my webpage, my Facebook page, Barry Penchak for Trustee. Contact me via email, telephone. I've given you all those contact numbers.